Hey guys, today I'm going to be making a video on the GTO Brainteaser that involved a modified version of rock, paper, scissors. And my goal in this video is to go over some of the basic game theory concepts like Nash equilibrium, pure and mixed strategies, the indifference criteria, and show you how to use these concepts to quickly and easily solve this game and others like it. So the problem was you're playing rock, paper, scissors against an opponent, and your opponent player 2 must play rock at least 50% of the time. And the way that worked is there was an independent judge who would flip a coin and show the result to player 2, but not to you. And if that coin came up heads, player 2 was required to play rock. If it came up tails, he could do whatever he wanted. And the loser of the game had to pay the winner $100, and a tie was no money was exchanged. And the question is, what is the optimal strategy as player 1, and how much would you pay up front to play one round as player 1, or what is the EV of the game? And the last part of the statement, the problem was that your opponent is smart. He's going to perfectly adapt to whatever you do. So a lot of people started with a leveling approach, which is kind of the naive way to think about this. And you might first think, all right, player 1 should always play paper because that's the counter to rock, and he's playing too much rock. But player 2 can respond to that by playing scissors half the time, rock half the time, and break even. And we're really hoping that player 1 should be able to come out ahead given player 2's big disadvantage. So player 1 can respond to that approach by player 2 by always playing rock. And of course, player 2 can respond by playing rock 50%, paper 50%, and get back to break even. And some people were trying some ideas where they were kind of averaging 50% rock, 50% paper, kind of averaging these best responses, these levels of thinking. But certainly some of the Reddit comments suggested that people were feeling a little bit like this guy. And that's the problem Nash equilibrium is designed to solve, is how can we kind of get out of this circle of leveling approaches and just skip to the end of the problem. So what is a Nash equilibrium? It is a strategy for each player in the game where even if both players know their opponent's strategy exactly, neither player can improve their expected outcome by changing their own strategy. So in Nash equilibrium, you kind of assume your opponent is your nemesis. He knows exactly what you're going to do, minus randomization, but he knows your exact strategy. And he's going to counter it perfectly, and you still need to find the best thing to do given that. So how do we find a Nash equilibrium? One of the first things that comes out of the definition is the indifference criteria, and it's very powerful in terms of solving for them. At an equilibrium, players are going to be doing one of two things. They're either going to be using a pure strategy, where they're playing a specific option all the time, or they're going to be playing a mixed strategy, where they're picking two or more of their alternatives, and they're selecting which one to play randomly. And a simple result of the definition of Nash equilibrium is that for a mixed strategy, each choice must have the same expected value for that mixed strategy to be a Nash equilibrium. And the reason for that is pretty simple. If our opponent's strategy is fixed, and we're mixing between, say, rock and paper, if rock had a higher expected value, we'd just always play rock and increase our EV, which would break the condition of Nash equilibrium. So how does this help us? Let's start off with some basic intuition that we can get without doing any math, just kind of thinking about this game a little bit. Let's assume player 1 can profit. It seems like he ought to be able to. Player 2's at a big disadvantage. For player 1, scissors is guaranteed to lose half the time because our opponent's playing rock at least half the time. So best case, it's EV0. And we know from the indifference criteria that if we were mixing paper into our optimal strategy, it would have to have the same EV as all the other options. So scissors can't be a part of winning strategy. Now we need to check the pure strategies to see if maybe pure rock or pure paper is best. But we saw in our leveling example, both pure rock and pure paper are easily countered by player 2 for break-even play. The last thing we can note is that if player 1 does anything that player 2 could match, then player 2 can match him and break even. So something like 50% rock, 50% paper, that's a strategy player 2 can do also. And if we let him match us, he'll break even and we're not getting anywhere. So player 1 needs to play rock less than 50% of the time so that he can't be matched. So if we combine these, player 1 must play a mixed strategy of paper and rock, where rock is involved less than 50% and they're both involved more than 0%. Now the next step we can take here, and this is kind of a sort of a version of something called the iterated elimination of dominated strategies, is once we've ruled out scissors for player 1, we can rule out rock for player 2. And the reason for that is if player 1's never playing scissors, for player 2, rock beats nothing, and we know player 1 is playing paper sometimes. So any option that beats nothing and loses sometimes can't possibly be a good choice. So just with those bits of intuition, we're basically ready to write down some very simple equations and solve this. The first thing to note is we said player 1 was mixing between rock and paper, which means the EV for player 1 of rock and paper have to be the same. And I wrote them out here. The EV of rock is the odds our opponent plays scissors because we win, minus the odds our opponent plays paper when we lose. And identically for paper. So the indifference criteria says those are equal. And we know that player 2 should only play rock when he's forced to. So we know R2 is a half. That's how often he's forced to play rock. And then we know P2 plus S2 has to also be a half because that has to fill in the rest of his strategy. The probabilities that he plays R2 plus P2 plus S2 all have to add up to 1. So at this point, we can just plug in a half for R2 and solve. And we get that P2 is a sixth and S2 is a third. And we can do basically the same thing for player 1 strategy. We know that player 2 is mixing between scissors and paper when he gets a choice. So we can apply the indifference criteria to that. And we know that player 1 should never play scissors, so S1 is 0. And this leaves us with a simple equation, P1 equals 2R2, and we know that they add up to 1, which means he should play paper 2/3 and rock 1/3. And there you have it. Those are the optimal strategies. So what is the expected value of the game? Player 1's playing 1/3 rock, 2/3 paper, 0 scissors, and player 2 is playing half rock, 1/6 paper, 1/3 scissors. The EV when player 1 plays rock is that he wins a third when his opponent plays scissors and loses a sixth when his opponent plays paper. And by the indifference criteria, we know that the EV for player 1 when he plays paper is the same. So either way, he's going to be making $16.16 and 66 cents on average. And that's the entire solution. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is our first brain teaser, so please let us know what you think on Twitter. If you're interested in more content of this type, definitely check out our blog. I'll be posting today with a text-based post on the solution to the bonus problem and how some of the logic here applies to poker. And you can, of course, subscribe to us on YouTube to get notifications anytime we release another video. Thanks for watching.